believe it.
Oh.
Hi, and welcome to the Woman's Cave.
I'm so sorry. Like I was looking at the record button and I was like, oh, let me touch it. See, this is what happens
when the medicine starts
to kick in. You're like, oh, if I touch it, nothing will happen.
Well, wait, we're recording.
I'm Jade, by the way.
And I will Nona. By the way,
high five, right?
Social distance style.
Absolutely.
Do you feel better now? Is your migraine going away?
I mean, let me just say, when the medicine kicks in, it kicks in. But now, I got about 30, 40 minutes before I'm just like, good night. So let's do it.
So for the next interview, she'll just be sleeping.
You'll hear my snoring on
and
the
I'll be
side.
like, no, let me interpret that snoring was the question.
It was a wonderful question. Okay. So, let's just talk about our literary life, guys, with pop poetry before we give away too many of our secrets.
Oh, like yesterday, it was like a grab bag of secrets. Ask a question, I'll give them away. Anyway, literary life guide number 1 is "And I thought divorce was bad" with other life lessons.
And I thought being grown up was easy. And if only I read, because we're just gonna go with everything that's audiobook today, because why not? All right.
Not to mention it's easier to listen to.
Absolutely, you could do other things like vacuum your house
while listening to it. Oh, never mind. Keep going. Keep going.
All right, sure. Absolutely. And you can find out everything your ladies are doing. The abbreviated version is www.andithoughladies.com, or you can go to the long, it has so much stuff on that website at www.andwethought.com. But y'all aren't here to hear about us.
You're here to hear about our wonderful guests. Wonderful guests, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you, ladies, for having me. My name is Sean Connors, and I'm an associate professor of English education at the University of Arkansas, where I read and write about literature for teenagers, young adults. And I also have a podcast that I've been hosting for the last 2.5 years that focuses on young adult literature and involves my talking with different writers about how they approach their work as creators.
Oh, wow. Great. So today you get to be that person, right?
And I have to say, it's a lot more uncomfortable on this side.
But every time we go to do an interview with a host, right? You ask them one question and then they answer your next question. You're like, this is how I know you're a host.
Yeah.
How I know. Because it'll happen.
So my first question that I've been wanting to ask a professor for a long time, and since you're the first one to come on, that doesn't have their own book to push for right now, is how do you make learning about reading and writing fun, other than the fact that, if you don't figure it out, you fail?
That's a really good question. And that's definitely not easy, right? I think a lot of the engagement comes through the questions that you're asking about books, right? Like, I'm sure you guys are readers and writers, and you turn to books because there are things that you're looking for, whether it's entertainment or you're thinking about questions that you're dealing with in your own life that you're answering. We turn to books for something. And I think a lot of the ways that we make it reading engaging for people is just through presenting them with big questions that we wrestle with in life, and that we can use books as a vehicle to wrestle with.
Okay, now the question is,
that was super amazing. First of all, let me just say that
it was done like a professor.
I was like, oh, this is gonna be on the quiz. I felt like I was gonna be on the quiz. Okay, anyway, I'm back.
See, no, because inside of me, I had that small bit of panic, and I was like, what is this about?
Yeah, I did. I had a small bit of panic, like I'm missing something good and it's going to be on the quiz.
But okay. No quiz. Trying to be serious again, because you are a professor, so you should be academic serious. My second question is, how do you keep it fun? Because those are the same books every year. How do you not be like, I'm sick of this?
Yeah, I certainly try to rotate the books that I teach. But I think you'd be surprised that, as I reread these books over and over again, I'm continuing to always see something new in them, right, myself. And I think that the older you get, and as your life experiences change and the different issues that you're wrestling with in your life, sort of enables you to see them in ways that you didn't, even just a couple of years ago. But definitely that is an occupational hazard, right? Teaching the same book over and over again. So I try to shift up what I do from one semester to the next.
Silly question on this, and I am the narcissist of the group, so it's going to be about me.
Oh, I'm so sad already.
I know, Jade.
I'm so sad there, already.
Sad. The silly question is, have you ever considered some pop poets to put in that rotation.
Some pop poets? Yeah, you'll have to.
Poets. Not even real literature. We're just gonna...
So what? Okay. Go ahead.
So you don't have to answer that question at all. That would be silly. But
well, I do. I was going to ask you when you said it's not real literature. What's real literature?
I don't know. My writing teacher told me I don't write real literature.
People tell us all
6 books in. He was like, you don't write real literature. So I was like, oh, okay.
People tell us all the time that we don't write real literature, which is great because that then sells our brand as pop culture poets. So that still works.
But see, that's exactly what I'm interested in is, why does pop culture not count as literature, with this capital L, right? That we tend to use in this idea that we tell people this is literature or this isn't literature. And it come back to that question. So why, right? Who decides what counts as literature or not, right? Is it schools or textbooks or people like me who are professors?
I was just about to say that.
Yeah, certainly. I'm with you guys. I would argue there's a lot of pop culture texts that I would consider literature, right? Even if they're not necessarily taught in an academic setting. So in other words, you are literary writers. You're producing your pop culture poetry. You are literary writers, in my opinion.
And I will accept that opinion.
Oh, I will.
I will accept it, and I will go forth with where I'm literary too.
I'm honestly right now, like figuring out how I'm gonna make that as a banner in my
room. I might actually make a dress out of it later.
You can use me for a blurb review. How's that?
There you go. Absolutely, I love it.
No, I was gonna say Dash, and it's gonna be like Sean Collins.
He said it on my podcast. You can look it up.
Okay, let's get back to seriousness. I know you have something good to ask.
No, I was gonna ask you, why did you start the podcast?
Yeah.
2.5 years ago, why did you start the podcast?
Honestly, with all that was going on with Donald Trump and all like sort of the chaos in the country and feeling overwhelmed by everything, I started to realize more and more I needed to find some kind of a creative outlet, something that I could feel like I was just making something or creating something new. And I'd been toying with the idea of doing a podcast for a long time. But as you I'm sure know, it's a lot of work, scheduling guests and preparing for interviews and all of that. And so I put it off, but it just had reached a point where I was like, I need to do something to find some kind of creative outlet before I go crazy. And what better creative outlet than to sit down and talk with writers and artists about their work. And so I started the podcast. And as I said, it's been 2.5 years now that I've been doing it.
That's amazing. I'm sure you have those good in-depth comfort questions.
I know, right? I feel like I should have thought of a couple, and I didn't.
Like as you were talking about it, I was like, these are not questions that he asked on his podcast.
So, as an instructor, see, this is medicine's kicking in. As a professor, what are some of the top things that you would tell people that want to pursue writing as a career?
So, first of all, as I'm sure you know, write. You've just got to write and write and write, because through the sitting at your desk and putting in the work of writing, you're inevitably going to get better. I see that with myself, that there are times if I'm away from writing for a long time, or I get that feeling of, I just don't want to sit down at the computer, I don't have anything to say. Like just in that gap of time, I feel like my skills start to atrophy. So I think certainly sitting down and doing that work every day and making the time to do it is probably the most important thing. And I think the second thing that I would tell people is think about what's your objective for writing, right? Is it to get published? Is it to make a name for yourself? Or do you just perceive yourself as having something you want to contribute to a larger conversation? And if you do, that's certainly sufficient reason to do the work of writing. But I think it's hard work. And I think that intimidates a lot of people.
So what do you get out of your writing? First, let me ask this. Mm-hmm. I'm going to take that question back. Mm-hmm. As a not good host, I'm taking the first question.
No, that was a good question.
It was.
But no, I thought of a better one.
Okay.
I thought of a better one.
Do you feel like, I don't know, in my mind, I think as a professor who analyzes literature on a daily basis, I would feel an immense amount of pressure when writing. So first, do you feel that pressure? And then secondly, what do you get out of writing?
That's actually a really good question. I think especially because when you're writing, when I'm like the writing that I do frequently involves my writing about other people's writing. And so I'm always cognizant of, am I being respectful of their work? And how would I feel if the author whose work I'm focusing on were to come across this piece of writing? You know, how would I feel about that? And would I be concerned about what they might have to say to me? And so certainly there comes that pressure. And I think that because a lot of the writing I do focuses on political aspects of text or thinking about text critically, there's pressure there that I don't want to wade into conversations that I'm not prepared to have and that are going to make me feel awkward or lead me to say something that maybe I don't necessarily intend to say. And then what was the second part of your question?
I think you answered both.
Yeah.
Really?
What do you get?
What do I get? And what do I get? You know, honestly, I think there's satisfaction in just sitting in a computer and thinking through ideas that you're wrestling with. I know that sounds crazy, but sometimes when you're sitting at the computer and you sit down with one idea or understanding that you want to work toward, and then as you're writing and you're working your way through it, you know, you get that moment where like the light bulb goes off and you're like, oh my gosh, you know, I never thought of this and I never saw this possibility. And I think there's that internal satisfaction of just doing that work, you know, and deepening your own understanding of yourself and what you're trying to say.
Okay, so like as a poet, I'm gonna definitely say absolutely.
Definitely. I mean, and I also wanted to say, thank you so much for using the word atrophy.
Yes,
because once you used it, I was sitting here, I was like, you know what's so funny is I was sitting here and I was thinking, I know a word to replace "oh." And once you said it, I was like, that's it. Ancient, and I'm like, that's not it. Thank you.
Okay. And I love how you put that as if you don't use a skill, you lose it, right? As we all know, there are certain things like we graduated college and we haven't used this set, and then someone asks you, and you're like, I forgot how to do that.
Yeah.
So let me remember. So yeah, that's a valid point on why to write and write often, because you don't want to forget.
Right.
And I have the last question is a throwaway question.
Okay. It's a throwaway question?
Yes, it's a throwaway question.
Oh my goodness.
I want to know what a student needs to know to make sure that their literary analysis is never just trash. Like, what are the top 3 things you like? Don't do that ever.
I don't know if I'd say don't do it so much as that's a really good question. Let me think about that one.
Because I plan on going back to school. I just want to know.
Another degree again.
I think that certainly, and this is really hard. I think this is really hard to communicate to students because students often they see, and understandably, they see what they're doing as an assignment that you've given them that doesn't necessarily carry any authenticity in their lives so much as they're going through the steps in order to complete the assignment. And that presents a challenge because I think oftentimes your better writing emerges when you're invested in what it is that you're saying. And so in that regard, I would say that one thing would be to think about like, what do you want to say? What do you have, if you're doing a literary analysis, what do you have to say or what do you feel compelled to say about whatever text that you're writing about? Because when you care about it, that's going to oftentimes carry through in your writing. And it's going to make, I talked about sort of that intellectual satisfaction that you can get of sitting down and doing the work of writing. It's also going to increase the likelihood that you're going to feel that sense of satisfaction with yourself. And I think another thing is, I think that oftentimes, sort of like what we've talked about today, when I ask students to choose texts they want to write about, they have certain expectations of what those texts have to be, right? And again, it's usually like literature with a capital L, sort of high culture. But I think you can make valid arguments about any kind of text. You can make valid, insightful arguments about films and television shows, and comic books and graphic novels, poetry, all of you know, sort of the broader realm of text beyond just traditional plays and novels and that we would read in academic settings. So I think that finding texts that you care about and that you want to write about are important as well.
Yep. For the first time ever, I feel like I actually want to analyze something that I've read.
I know.
For real.
I know. I'm reading now. I may have to write a paragraph about it.
I've got a question for you both, and I'm curious.
Absolutely.
Why are you guys compelled to write poetry? That's a genre that I don't have any experience with. I'm just curious why you write poetry.
Jade made me come back to poetry, and it kept selling, so I have to keep writing.
Well, because her poetry is beautiful, and she likes genre also, which we're not taking away anything from genre, because I mean that's how I got to read, right? Really enjoy reading genre, right? But I told her I think it's time to return to poetry, and she said, "Oh, you want me to be a poet? Thanks." Yeah. But then it worked out for the best, and then she was like, "If I gotta do it, you gotta do it, Jade."
I'm sorry, we don't have great, insightful answers like you gave all day today.
I wish I had something else to say. It's just a funny story that happened as we were going on to do a day trip. And then it just blew out of there.
Yeah, I thought it was good.
But I mean, I think I'm going to go with a more insightful answer because I have to sound semi-intelligent. You're a professor, crying out loud.
You have to clear your throat and make your voice
like a real literary student.
Like a literary student. There you go. Go ahead.
So I think in our later books that the reason that we pursued to continue to do poetry was not out of a drive of commerce at all, but more out of a drive to explain who we had become and why we had become those people, and why those people were just as valid as the books that were written before with the group. And also, does that sound valid enough?
Yeah, I think that's incredibly valid. I really like the point you asked about, like talking with students about writing. I love the point that you're making, because I think so often we think of writing as something that exists in classrooms, right? And that's like really a ridiculous assumption. You know, I work with, at the University of Arkansas, I work with people who want to be teachers. And I've taught high school myself. And it's really remarkable when you ask people, are you writers? They'll be like, no, I'm not. And I say, well, okay, well, what do you consider writing? And they'll say, like, you know, they're thinking like formal essays, books, kind of like that standard idea that we have about writing. And then you start to say, like, well, do you journal? You know, do you write poetry outside for yourself? Do you write song lyrics, whatever the case may be? Do you even social media, you know, that you're writing? And then it's like, oh yeah. And I think I love that your answer, like we all engage in some kind of writing for self-expression, and somehow schools warped our ability to recognize the value of that work.
I'm going to say one more thing for the writing thing. It's a lot of us making sense of the world around us, or just laughing about fun experiences. Because a lot of our books, we just have some really funny skits in there that makes no sense, and why is it in the middle of this book? Because it was us laughing about a fun experience. And I think that is not taught as much as it probably should be. That sometimes you write to make sense of stuff. Stuff that's happened to you, stuff that is happening around you, funny stuff that you overheard, whatever. Sometimes when you write it, it feels like, especially some of the sad moments, like when you write it, it feels like you got it out. Like you're still sad about it, but it feels less sad.
Absolutely. Yeah, less sad. I got to get you to talk to my students, because I think that's so well said. And it's almost like if we don't take the time to do those things, like you said, to make sense of our experiences, to express ourselves, it almost feels like we're somehow being less human, you know, because part of what we're all about is trying to make meaning and express ourselves and represent our experiences. I love that. I love how you put that.
Well, you can absolutely take that quote and use it with your students. Be like,
I'm my own banner.
Poet.
I'm taking my own banner away from
pop culture poet said.
I just wanted to say something about the writing is only in the classroom. And quickly, what I wanted to say was that I remember when I was like 11, just after I got published for the first time ever. I was 10 when I got published. When I was 11, I recognized that mathematics, that's wonderful. Science, that's wonderful, because I was good at science. And then I would recognize that writing actually was the binding glue between any of it, because no matter what you discover, you have to communicate it. And so I was like, writing is literally the shortcut to life. That's it's the ultimate life hack, because no matter what happens, somebody needs someone to communicate it in a way that it can be understood.
Absolutely.
And I was like, I'm the life hack.
Yeah, that's absolutely, and not taken away from the math and science people.
No.
Without them, we don't have a vaccine for COVID or anything else right now. But I think oftentimes those of us who write or make art or engage in any kind of like making of stuff, we get undervalued in society, you know. And you look right now, whenever I talk with writers for my podcast, one of the recurring themes sort of is like how creative writing gets dismissed as this side fluff thing, but how many of us have spent the last year immersed in Netflix, watching movies or reading books or listening to music? And like, who's doing that work? Writers.
Absolutely. Or even those fun Super Bowl ads. Somebody wrote it.
Yeah,
somebody wrote it.
All right, we gotta wrap this up.
We're gonna wrap it up because
obviously we can enjoy. I can enjoy this conversation about writing, which is something I never said.
Love to talk with you guys.
People are like, "Would you guys like to come talk about writing?" We're like, "Yeah, no, thank you."
Oh, Mila, we don't have insightful things to say. We would say, "How would you feel?" All right. Where can people find out more about you and your podcast?
Thank you. Yeah. Oh, where can you go? It's called the Storytellers Thread Podcast, and I've got it. It's on a number of different platforms like Apple and Google. So you can just Google the Storytellers Thread Podcast, and you should be able to find it.
Thank you
so much for stopping by. Absolutely. You can find out everything your ladies are doing on www.andrethought.com, or the abbreviated one is www.andithoughladies.com. And while you're at andrethought.com, take a moment, go down to the homepage and see what we have new and fun and popping off, especially the Ladies Tale podcast, where professional actors read well-known script, as long as other wonderful interviews that we have done. Yes, Winona's mad at me about saying it, but those interviews are fun too. And then, but more importantly than all of that, please take a moment, go to the ladies tab, go down to the middle and see the charities that we probably support. Maybe you can support them too, even if it's just with a thank you for doing this wonderful work in the world. At them on social media. We appreciate it very much. And remember, y'all, wisdom is all around you.
Be open to finding it and accepting it. So peace and love, you guys, from Winona
and Jade. Oh yeah, guess what I did? I totally saved myself from the beginning.